Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 9th meeting of Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum. I'm calling the meeting to order. The first thing on our agenda is public comment. And we have two names here of people who've signed up in person. Okay. All right. Yep. Yes.
Councilmember Reed? Here. Councilmember Harkars?
Here.
Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Wynne?
Here.
Councilmember Kelly? Here. And Councilmember Nusma?
Here.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
present.
So now we will go on to public comment. The first name I have on the list is Jean Breslin. Or Paul Breslin?
Yes, I'd like to comment briefly on item D1, the proposal of a financial solvency requirement.
Yes.
It seems to me that this is a matter of common prudence. I have read of buildings being abandoned, half-finished, because developers have run out of money. And, lots lying vacant because something was planned and didn't get built. And it just seems to me a matter of common sense and common prudence to make sure that the developer is in a position to finish what it starts. So if there are objections to this, I kind of wonder what they are. You don't want to get locked into an agreement with the developer and then find that they can't follow through. You also want to know if there are, for instance, pending lawsuits that might affect their financial capabilities that have not been decided yet. These are things that seem to me the city should want to know before going ahead with a development. So unless there's something I'm not able to see from my position, I don't see a reason to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Breslin, would you like to speak?
This seems like an extremely common sense proposal. I know that many other municipalities are already doing this. Why don't we do it? Why haven't we been doing it? Again, if there's any reason not to do so, I have not yet heard that reason. So I am all in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that completes the list that we have of people who are here in person. Does anyone online, is there anyone online who wishes to speak? Can you see?
Yes.
Hi, Melissa, I did.
Oh, hi, Mary. Mary Rosinski?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was speaking, I think, on behalf of also what previous people had said on the SPD, I think, whatever it was with the financial viability. I think that's just real good common sense. And I applaud you all for making this a referral out there, because the last thing we need is to support or approve a plan where someone is so marginally viable that then they end up failing and then somebody else takes it over. And then at that point, we don't know who has been, who's taking it over. I know over by me a couple of years ago, there was a plan for townhouses, and then there was some research done by residents. It turned out the developer from the city owed the city of Chicago tens of thousands of dollars in water bills, had a project that had failed, and there was an open hole in the ground, and now was coming here to try to recoup. So I think it's just really good common sense. So I agree with everyone who has spoke before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who would like to make public comment?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Sutton.
Good evening. I want to encourage you to support P1, the advocate for approving a special use development for South Boulevard. Before redlining, that was a very viable black community right there next to the cemetery that my grandfather would mention that he visited many black families there at the turn of the century. So I think this would be a good opportunity not only to spread housing opportunities around Evanston, but to reinstate an area that was traditionally, for many, many years, a black neighborhood. Secondly, I want to also ask you on D1 to make sure that any developer planning to build in Evanston should not have his plans dependent on funds from community sources. When we go to apply for a mortgage, we have to go through a whole lot of paperwork to see if we can afford the house and the monthly payments. No less is required of someone who calls himself a developer but does not have sufficient funds to complete the building. And the eyesore that stood there on the corner of Howard and Chicago Avenue for many years is indicative of the kinds of things that happens when you get involved with people who take too long to complete their building development. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who would like to speak? Okay, hearing from no one else, let's take up our agenda. First item is approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, the approval of the minutes of our meeting on August 28th, 2023. Ms. Flax, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris,
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Wynne,
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. And Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
The
7-0.
minutes are approved. So now we move to our first item for consideration, P1. Would someone like to move this?
I will move item P1, ordinance 99023, approving a map amendment and special use for planned development at 504 through 515 South Boulevard.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and I believe we have a presentation from Pearl Development.
Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
My name is Joanna Casanova, and I'm Senior Vice President for Pearl Developers. We're glad to be here and present to you the South Boulevard Shores development. Oh, the clicker. All right. Here, within part of our development team, we have Pearl Developers. We are a real estate owner, developer, and contractor working in Illinois and throughout the United States. We're not only a developer, we're actually a long-term owner of over 5,000 units, and we currently have about 700 units in Illinois. Together with us is Hooker DeYoung, their architect of record. They also work in Illinois, and we have a partnership with them throughout the United States. We have a very well-regarded JV with Leopardo Companies. Pearl is also a contractor, and they're working with us through the design project, and they will be our contractor. Online, we have Scott Farman with Database Plus. They are our energy consultant and will be able to answer questions virtually. And then here also with us, we have Kage. Kage is our civil engineer. And alongside with myself is also Eugene Hu, project manager for the project. All right, we're excited to introduce 60 high-quality, affordable units. We are very fortunate to be able to introduce 60 apartments. Our design intent included about 30 one-bedrooms, 12 two-bedrooms, and 18 three-bedrooms. Our goal was increase apartments to provide opportunities to families. Included, we have about 65 parking spaces. 20 of those will be reserved for leasing by the City of Evanston as required by the request for proposal on the property. Our idea was to blend and integrate with the community, and although it's a 5-story building, we have designed it in a way that it is in style with walk-up units. This is currently a parking lot, and our intent is to provide sustainable apartments in this as an infill development. With that, I'll leave you with Eric Marnin to explain a little bit more about the design concept. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eric Marng from Hooker de Young Architects, the architect for the project. You can see our front elevation there, and just give us some highlights of the building. Like Joanna said, we're looking at a 5-story building, a little over 62,000 square feet total. You can see from our elevation, our intent was to kind of set the building back, but also kind of cascade the front so it wasn't such a towering element along South Boulevard. We've integrated kind of some apartments as well as some walk-up units, so it isn't just a one-entry building. We've got some units that have entries along the street as well. Like I said, there's some units you can kind of see there with direct access, again, to kind of engage the street a little bit more than just a standard apartment building. We've got some green space and some common space. You can see on the rendering, we've got a terrace on the 5th floor to kind of create some extra space. You can see from the site plan, there's not a lot of extra space around the building, so we've kind of integrated that terrace to provide some space as well. That'll include some play areas as well for kids. And like Joanna said, we do have 20 spaces allocated for the city parking as well. And then we do have a flat roof, which will allow for future installation of PV panels as well. If you want to go to the next slide. Oh, that's you. Sorry, I had that somebody else. So you can see our site plan here. Our building is set back a little bit further from that building to the west there along South Boulevard. You can see on the east side there is the existing right-of-way, which will be partially vacated to allow access, and then it's still providing some access along the alley as well. You can kind of get a sense that north row of parking, our building does project over top of that, so that we will have some covered parking along that ground floor. So that building is 4 stories above that parking as well. And then we've kind of showed we indicated some of the sidewalk circulation as well, and the few crosswalks that we have along South Boulevard.
Here you can also see we intend to reestablish Heman Avenue, and we will be reassigning the right-of-way. So the property will be to the west of the right-of-way of Heman Avenue.
Okay, there you go.
We have our energy consultant virtually, so I'll talk through the slide. These projects are earmarked for a net zero certification. That's a requirement of our financing through the Illinois Housing and Development Authority. We're very excited about that. So we have a commitment to low carbon, all electric building. Obviously, our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We will be having PV solar panels on the roof to provide renewable energy, 2 electrical vehicle charging stations on site, bicycle storage and service amenities. We have best management practices for stormwater management, Energy Star appliances, recycling, and sustainable landscaping design, among other features. So we're very excited to increase affordability in the city of Evanston. Part of the RFP from the city of Evanston for us as developers was to increase affordable housing. We do have up to 80% of the average median income that will be able to apply for this development. That is a little bit of higher in the recent years. This project will include low-income housing tax credit, and we're fortunate to have already have an award. Those are competitive through the state of Illinois, and we were awarded back in June. Part of that will allow us to provide housing up to 80%. And for a family of 4 in this area, that's about $88,000. So that allows us to have a wide range from 30% to 80%. I think there's a couple facts here. I think Sarah has done some Texas research in the city. There's significant needs, so we're very excited about providing opportunities for family here. I think here, this is data from your own research. 40% of residents in Evanston pay more than a third, and actually that's no different than most communities throughout the United States. And the goal here is that no family will pay more than 30% of their income. About 42 of the 60 units will be affordable through the low-income housing tax credits. What that means is that a resident will come and pay up to 30% of their average median income, depending on the unit and household size. That will be tied to the 80,000 if it's a family of 4, as an example, or if it's family of 3, depending on that range, that specific household. There will be about 18 units that will provide affordable housing to, this is what we call with rental subsidy, and that will be with the Housing Authority of Cook County project-based voucher program that does allow to provide housing to lower income families and at the same time be able to preserve not paying no more rent than 30% of the AEMI. A little bit about the timeline. This team have been around for a little bit. I understand the city of Evanston has also done community outreach in the past. We started the RFP award in spring of 2022, and we were selected and continue to apply for the main source of financing for this project, which is low-income housing tax credits, which is investor-based. I want to be clear about that, so there will be investors involved in this development. In October, we applied. This was a competitive process, and we were fortunate enough to receive an award in June. The community engagement started with the city and with our team in the fall of 2022, and we obviously are here and are going to continue to work with the neighbors in the community. We have that ranging at the end of the year. Alongside, we are working on the design and development. We started preliminary engineering, and after ideally approval, we are continuing with the building review. So we obviously will continue to work with building officials about all the requirements for code. And then here we are, City Council, and our goal is to get permits and start construction sometime in spring, early summer, with an occupancy of summer of 2025. I think with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councilmember Reed.
Thank you for the presentation. I am in support of this. I just want to highlight for us that I appreciate you all in your work, and I appreciate staff in their work, and I also want to highlight that I appreciate Councilmember Wynne and her work, because quite typically when we have affordable housing projects, especially 60 units coming up in a neighborhood, quite often there are a lot of people in the audience who are upset and finding all kinds of reasons why we shouldn't be building it and it should be somewhere else, and that's not happening tonight, thus far. It's not happening here, and I think it's important to recognize that, and so I commend the full team that was a part of this, Councilmember Wynne and the neighbors in the 3rd Ward for being open to increasing affordable housing in their neighborhood. And I really appreciate this plan. I mean, I'm a bit curious about the bike infrastructure. I want to hear a bit more about that. You're right, you're a stone's throw away from a train station. So I'm just curious, how many bike stalls will you have? What are, I've heard of other developments that provide tenants with bikes. I'm not saying that you guys do that, but that also helps, particularly for younger folks and maybe the 1-bedrooms who have mobility challenges. So I'm just curious to hear more about that.
I don't know that we have a count. 47? Yeah, I think we are targeting as part of that area that's covered underneath with that parking. You can see a section there that's kind of cut out, is to put some parking in there just so that it's a little bit more secure than just out in a rack.
Okay.
Yeah, 47.
47. Okay. And then this is probably going to come from Councilmember Nusma, but I'm curious about the installation of the PV. So it seems that you said it's possible for the future, but you're not doing it now.
No, we will be doing 2 electrical vehicle charging stations. Is that?
No, I'm sorry. The
Oh, the
photovoltaic.
photovoltaic.
Yeah.
No, we will be installing solar PV panels on the roof. No, we will be as part of the development.
Okay, from
Yeah.
day one.
From day one,
Okay.
yes. We actually will have, in order to achieve our energy requirements, we will probably also purchase additional because the on-site panels will probably be able to provide energy for the common spaces. So,
Okay.
but yeah,
And just a separate question, I'll close out here, just for my own, and I think maybe this group's edification for our next discussion. Your financing for this project, is it completely together today? If we were basing our decision on whether or not you had your financing together today?
We do have most of our finances together. We're going through the final underwriting process, and that will include about 80 low-income housing tax credits. It will include a first mortgage also through the Illinois Housing and Development Authority. It will include Cook County Home Funds. And we will, it will also include self-financing through IDA. All of it has been awarded. We have to go through the final closing process and approval. So we anticipate to go to board sometime in January, and we've had discussions. So nothing is guaranteed, but we do have commitments for all of the financing. We just have to go through the approval processes.
And I would imagine that this is a first step in going through those approval processes?
Yeah, this is required as part of, moving
Yeah, maybe not a
forward.
first step, but this is a step in.
Yes,
yeah,
obviously, having a zone site and city council approvals, and then it will be permitting. So, with this, we are going through, our goal is IDA board, who's the low-income housing tax credits. That will probably happen in January, so we just have a consistent timeline towards April, let's say, for financial closing and construction start.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Nusma?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Reed, for asking some of the questions that I was going to ask. Following up on the question about PV, are you doing the PV installation on your own balance sheet or via some kind of third-party arrangement?
So just to clarify your question, the financing of the PV will happen through the project. Is that we will hire, in terms of a sub-consultant that will be the designer to the project for the PV.
Okay. So you'll be paying cash for the PV. Somebody will install it, you'll own and operate it.
Yes, yes, it will be part of the total financing to the project.
As opposed to a structure that the city of Evanston is looking at for one of our recreation centers, the Robert Crown Center. We're asking somebody else to own and operate it, and we'll just buy the electricity from them at a discounted rate. It's not the case for your project.
In our project, we will have, just to clarify and be correct, we will have a portion of PV that will be paid through the owner and the financing in the project. And then we may also purchase additional solar energy also through the project.
Okay.
And the financing does include also some energy grants. I didn't speak through the COMET program, energy efficiency program, but that will be all approved simultaneously and funded through the project.
Yeah, I love the fact that this is net zero. You know, this project speaks to two of the city council priorities that we just formalized on Saturday, affordable housing, of course, and then our climate action plan. So are you going for LEED Gold certification? I read in the packet, LEED Gold or equivalent, and we've had some other projects that were certified according to the Green Globes methodology, which I would also be amenable to if that would make your life easier.
So it is our understanding that the City of Evanston Sustainability Ordinance does call for LEED Gold. Our project anticipates going through the Enterprise Green Net Zero certification at this time, so not the LEED. But obviously, when we net zero is relatively new, so with our energy consultant, when we go through the process, we may switch to a different certification. But yeah, right now it's Enterprise Green Community to Net Zero.
And that certification, whichever one it ends up being, would require a commissioning of the system after it's designed and after it's built?
That is correct. And Scott Farben, I think, Scott, are you virtually online?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great. Correct me if I say this incorrectly. But yeah, it does include design review, inspection through the construction period. And it's my understanding Net Zero also has 1 year of operations that we will have to track in order to attain the certification.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to make sure that the commissioning of the system, once it's installed, everything is
tweaked and tuned, and the control systems are working with the HVAC units, so everything is optimized. So the units will be all electric. Will they be induction cooktops or, standard burner coil stoves?
Scott, would you mind explaining the MEP system?
Yeah. I don't think it's been determined yet if it will be induction, but there are electric options that aren't kind of the traditional coil approach. They do have ceramic tops and work just as well as the induction ranges. So I think that's still under consideration, which appliance type it's going to be, but as Johanna mentioned, all Energy Star rated.
And it's all electric in any case. Will there be washers and dryers in the units?
Yes, there will be washers and dryers in this unit.
Okay, and so the dryers, all electric dryer, will that be some kind of fancy new technology?
Great question. We currently spend an hour analyzing. We're still trying to analyze whether we will do ventless dryers,
Okay.
but if
One
not,
way or
it will
the
be
other.
all electric duct work.
Okay, and how about hot water? Will there be individual hot water heaters in each unit, or will there be one single system for the building?
Scott, do you know where we are? You were currently going through the design process.
Currently being designed as a centralized domestic hot water system, but it will be with heat pumps. So it's a progressive piece of equipment to provide hot water to all of the units.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Excited about this. So will there be any natural gas line going to this building?
No.
Awesome. All right. A lot of good things going here. I only have one piece of I'll call it feedback. The north elevation. I'm not an architect. I'm not an artist. But the north elevation strikes me as kind of out of balance and asymmetrical and not particularly aesthetic pleasing. It looks better in this rendering than it does in the rendering that was in our packet. Yeah, the color differences are more muted in the rendering we're looking at on the screen here. So
I think the target was an elevation, so we heard the same feedback last time. Yeah.
okay, all right, but yeah, I'm looking forward to approving this. Thanks.
Well, I'm very excited about the project as well. To have this many affordable housing units is really, really great, and providing a range of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, so we can help a lot of families find an affordable housing. And the net zero aspect of it is really exciting as well, and it sounds as though we're going to learn a lot from what you do, and you can help teach other developers how to do all-electric buildings going forward, which I think is certainly a goal we're setting for ourselves very soon. I had one question for staff, which was, I noticed in the Land Use Commission meeting, they took 2 separate votes, one vote for the map amendment and then a second vote for the plan development itself, and I was just wondering, but what we're doing is voting just on one, we just have one all-encompassing motion, so could you explain the difference there?
My understanding is they separated the two for 2 reasons. One is just the number of standards that they have to go through to be efficient. It's easier to vote on either piece at one time. And then at the Land Use Commission level, I suppose they could have rejected the map amendment and asked them to come back potentially to make changes, but one is certainly dependent on the other. So the whole framework, the zoning framework, particularly the density and the dimensional framework, so the height and the setbacks and the number of units, is really dependent on the map amendment, so that's why it's one ordinance in front of you.
I'm just particularly attuned to that since the stadium proposal has a text amendment, which I assume we'll handle differently than we would if it were a map amendment.
Yes, exactly. The Northwestern Stadium is much different in that one could be approved without the other. They're not dependent on the other necessarily. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Howard Karas?
Hi. Thanks for the presentation. I'm really excited about voting yes for this. This was actually the first thing I voted on. The RFP was the first thing I actually ever voted on from the dais, and that was almost like a year. I'm bad with time, but 2 years ago almost. Just for the public to know, how long has this process been going on? Like, because I know the RFP was approved in February. How much lead up time, and how, just so that people know how long it takes to get these projects completed? Because it looks like the completion date will be summer of 2025. And so what's the entire time frame?
In general, we always say it takes about 3 years, but this project did include the RFP, so you kind of have to add that to it. So that took about a year of RFP process, and we are lucky and fortunate that we got the award. So we applied for the low-income housing tax credit in January, and then we got awarded in June. So, but we were continuing a little bit slower pace the zoning. When we get the award, usually it takes ideally less than 2 years to close. So now from the award, we're going to try to do 6 to 8 months and close.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burns?
Also excited about this project. I'm sure you've done your homework on the P&D committee, and if you expected this to get voted out of P&D, I think you're right. One question I have is the 3 bedrooms. How many of those? What are the AMI levels for the 3 bedrooms? Has that been determined?
Yes, just give me a second. So we have in all the unit types, 1, 2, and 3, a range from 30s, 60s, and 80s. So we have all 3 in the 3 bedrooms. So we have a couple assigned to 30% AMI, so a family, and those are the ones that will have the rental subsidy. So families that have lower income are able to still live in the facility and pay very low rent. So rental subsidy will come by the Housing Authority of Cook County. We also what we call the 60%. That used to be traditionally what people thought of low-income housing, because until recently that was the limit, and now we have 80%. We're allowed to do a range. If we do 30s, we can do 80s, and we also have those, and those are the higher income families that up to 88,000 can live there.
And so how many 3-bedroom units in total?
18.
18.
We have, what was the count?
And then once you get the amount, if you could just break down what percentage, was that 30%, what percentage will be
So
at 60
yes.
and then 80?
We have 18 3-bedrooms, so we have 8 at 30%, we have 3 at 60%, and we have 7 and 80%.
Okay.
Now, those could slightly change, so as long as the average of the 18 amounts up to 60% AMI.
Okay.
So.
And then you mentioned a space for, I don't know if you said children or just like play areas. Can you describe the square footage and then where that is and then what you're thinking about? Is it kind of an open play space? Is it programmed? Just trying to understand that space.
Yeah, we do have obviously a tight site. We're trying to be creative. I don't know if you can see here. Is this the floor plan? Can you see it here? I am blind. It's on the top. Yeah, that corner, right? Do you have the square footage? We apologize, but our main architect was out today, and Eric is helping us. But is that terrace
Okay.
in the top? Our site is tight, so we couldn't really have. However, we are already thinking on design strategies,
Right.
like some green walls. And on the top, the rooftop area, I don't have the square footage, unfortunately, but we're planning to have some flexible area with flexible pavement so that toddlers or kids can kind of play around.
Okay.
And then right there on the top, we have the community space. So our intent is that kind of like the indoors go to the outdoors and have some sliding doors so that you can have some flexible space and open it to the outdoors.
But is the play area and the outdoor space the same space, or
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. So it's that entire area.
Okay, I see that. And are there any other the office spaces, community rooms, any
Yes.
other spaces inside?
Yes, in the first floor, and we don't have the floor plans. I don't know if they're in your packet.
They
too.
are in the
There may be, yeah.
The first floor does have an office area, so we're gonna have a lobby and an office areas for a property manager. We're still determining if there will be part-time or full-time. If we can do full-time, we'll do that. If not, there will be associated hours in the building. And then there's also a fitness center. And then we will have like the typical party room that is by the garden area on the top. And then we have like about one office style in each floor that we're brainstorming around the uses, and we'll probably collaborate with the property manager. We are seeing more and more after the pandemic to have kind of workspaces. So probably in every other floor we'll allow for computers and people to go and get
Nice.
out of their home for that. So
Yeah, that's excellent. And then you answered my last question, which was the property manager or just someone on site. So that's great.
yes, yes, and we will definitely also have linkages to the community. We're already in conversations with some of those to provide programming,
Yeah.
financial sufficiency for the school children, and support, because that's the main intent. And we have a great site. It's right by the train station, so the
Exactly.
idea people jump on the train and go and access all of the great amenities that the city of Evanston has available a couple blocks away.
Sure. Great job. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Is there any other comments?
Okay, yeah, I've been asked to talk about the loading because our land use commission, one of the conditions was to add a loading area. We have assigned a loading area, and this is kind of in conversation with our property manager, by the Heman Avenue. So Heman Avenue, what is the width, Brad? 60 feet? 47 feet is the right-of-way of Heman Avenue, so it will be full two lanes. And then we have assigned, sorry, I don't know if this has a, nope. But if you see in Heman, just by the east entrance of the building, we have assigned that as the loading area. That will still allow for small trucks and mostly deliveries to be there, and you still have your 2-lane. We decided that over in the parking area because we don't want to block handicap spaces. Although we're still trying to plan kind of a space reserved on the parking area for smaller Amazon trucks to still be able, the U.S. Postal Service, to be able to have an area where they can unload. But that's where we have decided to assign the loading area.
Thank you. Well, I will say thank you very much for all of your hard work. I think every time that you've presented, I learn new layers of what it takes to put together a project like this. I'm really excited about this. We are taking a very underutilized parcel of city property, combining it with Cook County, and what we're ending up with is an affordable housing building that's designed for families, which is something that we haven't been able to do. And I hope that this will serve as a template for other sites here in Evanston, because when we have the control of the land, we've been able to do something really exciting and extraordinary. And I agree with my colleagues about the building being net zero. That's really extraordinary for an affordable housing building. I think we have a very active environmental justice group here in Evanston, and I think that they would be really they'll be very pleased to learn about this. So thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you to the staff for all of the hard work. It's been a long journey, but I think this is going to be very exciting when it gets open and families move in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Fox, will you call the roll? Wait, Cade, would you like to say something?
I just had one clarifying point. If the committee is agreeable to the loading that they've proposed, you'll need to make an amendment to the ordinance.
Yes, can you get us some language on that, or can we do it?
I will move that we accept their proposed loading. Say it again?
Can you give it to us at a council, and we'll take it off and then add it? Okay. All right, Ms. Fox, will you call the roll?
Absolutely. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynne.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
and Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
7-0.
All right, the building passes. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to our next item, which is an item for discussion. Would someone like to move this?
I wonder if, given time, we're 20 minutes behind for council, do we want to have this discussion today, or? Yeah.
What is the-
I'll move that we discuss item D1, adding a financial solvency requirement for planned developments.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Is there any Councilmember Kelly?
Sure. So the idea of this is just really to offer transparency with regard to financial solvency and viability for planned developments. We already do this anyway for TIF developments. It's a requirement, and I see no reason that we shouldn't expand this for the city. It can be a requirement, or it can simply be providing the information as part of the application process so that there's transparency, so it can be considered. I'm open to considering whether it's in fact a requirement for standard, as a standard for approval, but minimally, I feel this should be a question, just as it is for all applications for TIFs, with RFPs for TIFs. There's a section for financial information. So I just think it's really important that we know whether a developer, has what the plans are to finance it, or if there is, if they're able to capitalize it. We want to make sure corners aren't going to be cut if we are approving a variance or a planned development. So we don't want to end up in our city not having been aware of that. Just at least by asking these questions, the pertinent questions related to that financial solvency piece, financial viability, or simply the plans, like, some evidence of plans as stated for TIF proposals, sources of financing, preliminary evidence of interest from financial institutions or partners. And it explains here in our regular, RFPs for TIFs, what's required. So I'm asking that we do this for all developments, that this be part of the application process.
Councilmember Reed?
Thank you. I think I understand the goal behind this, and I can get behind that. I do think that, as we just heard here, the financing for large developments is quite complex and often is not finalized at this stage. I do think that if the city is contributing a significant amount of money to a project through granting land or turning over taxpayer dollars to support the project, I think it does make sense to seek those statements. So I could potentially get behind a more limited scope version of this.
Councilmember Nusma, or Councilmember Kelly, would you like to respond?
Yeah, just, again, I think that this is about minimally just having the question. I'm willing to amend this to not make it a requirement for a standard of approval, but simply that question. We should be aware of these conditions, whether it's simply the financial plans to complete it, such as applying for LIHTC for those credits or whatever it is, but that should be, something that we're considering and that we're asking for. Again, I would say similar to what we require for TIF developments, we should minimally have that question about financial solvency. I mean, we do want to know that the developer has some skin in this game, and that it's not going to be about, if we don't know it at all, that we suddenly see a project that what we were expecting, corners cut, or a hole in our business districts because a developer had very little had very little capital in the project. So I think we need to know this going forward, and I'm willing again to amend this so it's not a standard for approval, but simply a question that is required to answer as part of the application process.
Just a point of, if I may ask a quick question, Councilmember Kelly, would those documents then become public documents?
I would leave that to staff I think we would have to, I think it would be something that other cities do this, and I'll let Ms. Williams explain a little bit how this is done, but this would be information that would be provided in terms of making a decision.
So to respond to Councilmember Reed's question, yes, it would become a public record because it would be associated with an application. Even if it is a submittal requirement, it does require us to amend Title VI because submission requirements are listed in the appendix of Title VI. So that does still require this to go to Land Use Commission. In terms of other jurisdictions and what they're doing, there were 3 local examples we were able to identify. The Wilmette, Winnetka, and Oak Park require essentially preliminary financial feasibility documents or evidence that the applicant has the ability to complete the proposed project as one of their standards of review. It also gives discretion to the village board to require an economic pro forma at their discretion be required. So it is something most jurisdictions will require this type of provision in terms of a letter of credit or a surety or some sort of security at the time of building permit review, because that's when they're going to break ground. One of the ways that the City of Evanston addresses projects being granted entitlement is we put a 2-year limit on those entitlement approvals. So when you say, yes, this project is approved, the applicant has to pull a building permit within 2 years, or they have to request an extension of that planned development from the city to continue to move forward with that particular application. So there's several ways that jurisdictions address this particular item, and so I guess staff is just seeking direction before we head to the Land Use Commission on which way to go.
Okay, I have 2 others. Councilmember Newsma and then Councilmember Burns.
Thank you. That I think was helpful and so if I'm, what I don't quite get is what actually we would be asking for. And so as I understand it, we would not be requiring proof of financing to be locked in at the entitlement stage. Like that would be entirely
I think that would be
inappropriate.
difficult.
That's just not how things work, and I would 100% be opposed to that. What we might be asking for is some kind of proof of financing at the permitting stage, which would be a better time to do it, but I do have to ask myself, what problem are we trying to solve here? And the hypothetical problem is we don't want a landscape full of half-built buildings where the developer disappears, after the first floor is built or the foundation is dug and then they disappear. I don't see that really is a significant problem. And I'm aware of only one project that went through kind of such a hassle around the 2008 financial crisis, and that could happen again. But I also have to look at our council goals, which we formalized on Saturday, and economic development was one of those goals, as was affordable housing. And any impediments we put in place that could have a chilling effect on new development across the board, I would be very, very reluctant to endorse. We do have right now the ability to impose a financial test on a planned development at the council level on a case-by-case basis. Is that correct?
That's correct. The council could propose a condition of approval that some sort of bond or surety be in place at the time of building permit to address any concerns with completion of the project.
Yeah, so I think I would be most comfortable with the status quo, which does give us the right to impose that financial test if the situation warrants it, rather than as a blanket requirement for any possible development, which just opens up the door to more accusations of Evanston being a difficult place to do business. And I think we all agreed on Saturday that we want Evanston to be a good place to do business, and we need more affordable housing. We need more housing, period. We need more economic development in commercial buildings as well. So this is just for discussion. We're not voting, but hopefully my feedback has been important
Okay, thank you, Councilmember
and
Burns.
useful.
And then Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, certainly would not want this to be added as a new standard for our land use commission. Would not want this to further burden affordable housing developers as they try to finance projects and go through very hyper-political processes. People are not jumping up and down trying to find affordable housing projects to fund. The market the market doesn't really know how to solve for affordable housing, which is why we have affordable housing developers, which is why we have the federal government that steps in with LIHTC funding to provide funding for these projects, because the market won't, right? The market has failed to provide the necessary affordable units that communities need. And but because you're dealing with very complicated funding processes, some of which are hyper-political, the money is not always there when we may want it to. But in most cases, especially in Evanston, the money does come through. I mean, that's been my experience since I've been observing Evanston politics. So kind of to Councilmember Noosa's point, I would love to know what, when this has been an issue. We also have at our disposal the kind of rehabilitation requirement that somebody has to submit a rehabilitation plan if the property goes a certain amount of time without being listed on the market. I know that worked out on Jackson and Emerson. We were able to do that very quickly, get the owner to submit a plan, let us know if they planned to demo, if they were going to rent the units back out, and we were able to get things going through policy that we already have in place currently. So that's what I can offer for now. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Kelly?
So I'd be curious to know, Councilmember Noosma, we do require this for TIF proposals. Do you feel that that's appropriate? We require sources of financing and preliminary evidence of interest from financial institution or partners, and it explains what the evidence can be. I'd be curious if you think that should be removed also.
I would have to review what's required by TIF, and so I'm not, to be clear, Councilmember Kelly, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking for.
Information that I think we should, as a standard, request, and I'm saying I'm willing to amend this so that it's, as opposed to making this a standard for approval, it's simply a question. It's almost just an administrative task that we add it to our applications so that the information is available. So that if this is something that is of concern, it's available. It's not debated at council whether or not we should ask that information, but it's simply part of the application process, the same way we do that for TIFs. And I would also say that I think I'd also be fine with potentially leaving an option for staff to waive for good cause, if there's good cause shown for not asking. Now, I can't imagine what that would be. You don't have to demonstrate necessarily, just like here, it's what your plans are, the financial plans.
So what are you asking for? Are you asking for a copy of bank statements? Are you asking for just a table of funding sources?
Yeah, so here the sources of it says evidence can include letters to the operator or development team indicating interest in financial participation on future projects from the financial institutions or partners. Some evidence of how that's going to be financed going forward.
Okay,
I think it's a very reasonable question to have in an application for a plan development when we're asking for zoning variances.
I have two other council members, Councilmember Harkaris and then Councilmember Revelle.
I agree. I think that we shouldn't be putting more hurdles in place for affordable housing developments. I think it's perfectly fine to ask those questions if we're using TIF money, because that's city dollars that we're handing over. But, we just saw in the presentation that even Pearl, who has this amazing project, did not get their actual funding in place until way after being chosen. And so I'll be fine leaving things the way they are.
Councilmember Rubel?
Well, I agree that I'm comfortable with the way things are, and I guess my thought about the TIF requirement is that's likely language from state legislation. It's probably, not Evanston. Evanston didn't come up with that all by ourselves.
I was going to mention that and Paul, please don't get mad at me for pretending to be the economic development manager right now and speak on TIF. But my understanding is one of the tests for financing of TIF is a but-for test, that the project would not move forward without the ability for the TIF funding to finance that project. So I think that's more of what the financial pro forma is trying to demonstrate at that point, is that the TIF is necessary in order for the project to move forward. But that's based on my understanding of that legislation.
Okay, Councilmember Reed and then Councilmember Kelly.
Yes. I also want to note that with TIF, we'd be using taxpayer dollars as well, so the city would be an investor, if you will, in that project, and so I think it makes sense. And so I am willing to get behind if there's a significant investment from the city. If I recall correctly, a couple of years ago when I read something about this topic, particularly when we're talking about new subdivisions, or I think it's, if the investment from the city equals over 10% of the total project, or some percentage, I may be off on the 10%, but I could get around some kind of metric that would trigger this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. So, again, this isn't really asking that much. Even Pearl simply would have stated what their plans are for, low-income tax credits, et cetera. There would have been a financial plan provided. And yes, it's a wonderful project, and that's going to happen, but that would not have precluded this plan from going forward to have provided that information for financing. So I'd be willing, I don't know if we could potentially direct staff to come up with a potential sort of metric or the type of questions that could be asked. I don't think it's really asking that much, and this is just adding a layer of protection, or at least information, so there's transparency about projects if we are allowing for variances to zoning or other. And I really don't see why we wouldn't want to ask this of a developer. I'm a little bit like, what's the big deal to ask a couple of questions about financing a project?
Yes, Director Flax, would you like to speak?
Not addressing that specific question, but I did want to point out that whenever anybody is applying for low-income housing tax credits, we can provide their pro forma. They've already provided it to IDA. And that is generally what we can do that, and didn't in this particular case because they're not asking for soft funding or anything from us, but that's readily accessible. The private market is a little more sensitive to providing the same levels of financial disclosure. They're not required to, so I think that's the difference. And if we're not funding them, it's a different challenge.
Yeah, and since we do have the right to impose that requirement now on a case-by-case basis, I think we're good.
I think we should, I think we've had a good discussion. I think we should wrap up and head towards. Councilmember Reed.
Sorry. I will make a motion that I think folks here are potentially willing to get behind this for certain scenarios, and maybe I'm reading the room wrong. Particularly if the city is making a substantial contribution, so I'd be willing to make a motion to have this come back in whatever time staff needs to investigate with a proposal that would limit the financial solvency requirement to instances where the city is making a substantial contribution. So I'll move that if that's something.
I'll second that. Though I
Okay.
wouldn't say it wasn't even, I had modified it not to be a requirement, but, well, a requirement to provide the information, but not for standards for approval. But I'll second that.
And I think we can have conversation with staff to hone it in more. So yes, I made that motion.
But, I mean,
Seconded
are you
by Councilmember
proposing
Kelly.
we change city code in some way, or just direct staff to do that?
I think Councilmember Kelly and I can maybe meet with staff and figure out the best direction, whether it is a required code change or just a direction of staff, but I think we can figure it out and bring something back for this committee to approve.
I'm a little bit reluctant to let this thing drag on. If it's not going to go anywhere, let's make the call right now.
I think if folks are supportive of making this requirement specifically for when the city is making a substantial contribution, that should be the determining factor, whether you think this should move on or not whether it's an ordinance or a policy, that we can figure out, but just the principle of if the city is making a substantial contribution, should we get some financial solvency documentation for the project?
Director Flax.
Councilmember Reed, I would never bring a request for funding to City Council without having significant financial information on a project, just as we do with TIF. Remember with HODC, we had their pro forma. They were asking specifically for financing, and their pro forma was attached, and we took the Housing and Community Development Committee, went through that as well. That's a standard process for all of our affordable housing developments that are requesting funding from us.
Councilmember Kelly.
So I would also obviously advocate for this as part of the referral, that it's also for variances from where we are basically, selling variances, that I would want to know that a project that again, it's a preemptive measure so that we're aware, and so that we're also letting developers know that we want to ensure that a project is going to go forward without cutting corners as debated and discussed and approved. And that's all. It's a simple request, and I think it's important that developers know that that we do care, and that we're not going to just say yes without having some assurance of feasibility if we're allowing for, a project, a planned development to go forward.
So are you, is that?
So I would like to see at least a, what the question would be. There's a simple one here on the TIF, something similar to that we could include on the application process. Again, I don't think it's asking a lot. It's simply information for us that says that we do care. And right now, things are getting very expensive to build. And I certainly don't want to see a building get raised and find out that we have a building half completed because we were not aware of this, or because we had another debate about whether we wanted the finances. This should be front-loaded, not back-loaded, prior to being approved. That's how you have the impact in terms of, protecting your city against developments that are later unable to be funded.
I think I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think that you have the majority of the committee in supporting you on that. Am I reading the room correctly, as yes. Councilmember Reed says? So I don't think that this is going to be moving forward then. Okay.
I withdraw my motion, but
We're already doing what you're.
I think just ask. I'm pretty sure in most of the cases that we'd be concerned about, if we ask for that information, either it would be provided, or as Ms. Flax said, some of this information has already been in our packets. So let's just ask and see where that gets us.
But it's messaging to the development community when it's on our application. That's all. It's a big, it sends a message, as opposed to, oh, by the way, did you find out? It's on our application. This is something that we are, that we care about.
Yeah, I think we just ask. Personally, I am, I would need to know what the language is, but I'm less concerned about disclosure. There still would be a lot needed to unpack, which is why I'm not ready to support anything tonight. My biggest thing is I just don't think it should be a new standard, especially not for our land use commission, but it doesn't seem like there's enough support to move forward. So.
Sure. Point of order, or point of information, I think. I'm curious, so we have items that get referred and they appear for discussion. I don't know if the referrals process only, if it appears for discussion, that's the end of it. I do think the proper process is that something is voted on by the committee. So either we make a motion that we're done with it today, or I'm happy to take some time over the next couple months. I don't have a lot of free time now, but to meet with Councilmember Kelly and staff to figure out if there is something here. I do think Councilmember Kelly is raising some, there's a legitimate concern there, and I think we can suss it out and bring something forward that either explains what staff is already doing, so there's clarity for us, or improves upon that process in some way. And I'm happy to take some time to figure that out.
I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Reed, but I don't know that that is the sentiment of the majority of I think it's not the sentiment of the majority of the committee. So I don't think that it would be a valuable effort, especially involving staff time.
Then I would just say that I think the proper procedure, if we're not going to move forward at the stage of discussion, would be a motion to dispatch of it or something. That there needs to be a vote of something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I felt a little frustrated this was coming through just for discussion again. I mean, I'd rather see this come back as something that we're voting on, but it's vague as it is. It is a discussion. It's not an action item, so I don't think we can vote on it. But I do think this should come back as an action item with more specific language. I think we, Councilmember Newsma, Wynne, and myself, I was the main sponsor. This was referred almost a year ago. So I'm a little frustrated with the way this has gone, and I would also prefer not to vote on tonight because it's very vague, but to have something specific to vote on.
I don't think that we should vote on anything tonight because we haven't determined something to vote on. But Councilmember Kelly, if you wanted to come back as an action item, then I think it has to go through the process, correct?
If I could weigh in with a
Yes.
point of order, should a council member want to continue pursuing this, a council member could get a couple of other council members on board and make another formal referral with some specific language.
I think that would be useful.
The process does exist for that.
I hear you, but point of order, I don't think every referral has the language when you make the referral, and I don't think that should be the requirement. We are just lowly paid council members who don't really have the resources to draft, an ordinance necessarily on our own, and so I do think that that's the reason we had co-sponsors, right? We added in the mechanism, and you were one of them on this, and that was meant to be the kind of gatekeeping.
A co-sponsor to have this discussion, which I think resulted
or to get a policy.
An answer that's fairly clear is that this is not the sentiment of this committee and presumably not the full council. And let's not waste any more of staff's time. Let's not spend any more of staff's time on something that is inevitably not going to go anywhere.
I agree. I'll just say for all of us that if you are going to co-sponsor something, the idea should be that if you're a co-sponsor, you are expecting to see a policy that is put in front of a body at some point and voted on.
Thank you.
Okay, I have two others, Councilmember Revelle, and then Councilmember Burns, and then Councilmember Kelly.
Well, I was just going to suggest that maybe we should just vote yes or no on Councilmember Reed's motion, and that will decide, will indicate whether we want staff to invest any more time in this.
All right.
I reinstate my motion if I can do that.
Yeah, Chair, that was what I was going to say, too.
Okay, all right. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Or move to table this to.
No.
Okay,
you made a
okay.
motion. You made a motion. All right. Director Flax, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
No.
Councilmember Revelle.
No.
Councilmember Burns.
No.
Councilmember Wynne.
No.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Newsma.
No.
Okay, I think
5-2.
We've clarified things.
Okay.
And seeing nothing further to come before us, I declare us adjourned. The council meeting will start at 7 o'clock.